So Ashley first joined UCD Smurfit School in 2004. She's been teaching on our MBA program for the past 10 years. And I know Ashley won't be shy if I say she's consistently rated as one of our top lecturers by students. Her connections to business ensure she has a pragmatic and applied approach to her learning. And I was delighted Ashley was available to join us this morning so you could get the experience of her lecture. And just to remind you, please use the Q&A function if you have any questions for Ashley. And Ashley, I'm going to hand over to you now. So thanks for joining us this morning.
Lovely. Thanks, Sophie, and good morning to everybody. And I'm delighted to be able to join you today. So as Sophie said, I teach leadership and organisational behaviour, and this is a core subject on both the executive and the full-time MBA programmes. So it's an important part of my work and something that I have to say brings me fantastic joy. I'm fascinated by organisations and how people function within them and I suppose the impact of the structures that we create. So I called today my session Adventures in OB, and really what I want to do is just give you literally a kind of tiny taste of the areas that I work in. So my subject area is essentially explaining why people behave the way they do in the workplace. So we look at that from the point of view of how people work as individual contributors. We look at them from the point of view of how their behavior changes when they work in team structures. And then sitting then within an organizational structure where you have the impact of things like organizational culture and the effect of leadership and the market forces, obviously, depending on what type of organization that you're working in. So what I bring, as Sophie mentioned, is sort of an applied practice. I look at theory in terms of does it work in the real world, and as I say, I work across industry as well. So that helps me look at the theory through an applied practice lens, which I think is certainly beneficial to students. So I'm not going to keep you too long today. It's probably about half an hour for my session, but I teach in a very interactive way, and I like people to participate. So I'm going to issue an invitation to you all to work with me in the coming half hour. So what I've done is I've prepared a series of polls on subjects, just statements relative to my OB area. And I'm going to literally launch some polls through the session and invite you to look at the statement and to select the answer of choice. And then I'll have a little chat around what we're discovering as we work through together. So I should say that it's anonymous answering, so don't worry, you're not going to be linked to a right or a wrong answer in any possible way. So please work with me, enjoy it, and we'll have a bit of fun together. So Adele, can I ask you to please launch our first poll and encourage people to respond? So there you go. Choice of words and tone of voice are the dominant determinants of effectiveness of face-to-face communication. True or false?
Super.
That's interesting. Okay, so we've 83% saying that it's true and 17% saying that it's false. Well, I'm going to surprise you all and tell you that the people who voted false are actually the correct ones. So you can take that down, Adele. So this is research by Professor Mahabrian, which interestingly showed that when we are communicating face-to-face, that in fact it's our body language that is the greatest determinant of how effective we are in terms of getting our message across. And while tone of voice is important and the words we use are critically so, but his research would show that 55% of the message is carried in the body language, 38% is carried in the tone of voice. And of course, you know this when you ring somebody that you know quite well, and you can tell the moment they answer the phone whether they're having a good or a bad day by the tone that they answer with. And literally just 7% is caught in terms of the words that we use. So if you think about this, we're actually living this at the moment because when we're on Zoom, and particularly from my point of view as a lecturer, if I'm teaching to virtually and nobody has their camera on, well, then it's incredibly hard. I don't get any facial reaction. I don't know how people are engaging with me at all. And I've no idea. And all of that sort of feedback that I get from observing body language, how people are sitting, you know, what their eye contact is like, and literally just being able to read whether they are engaged or not. So well done to the 17% of you who nailed that. Can we go on to the next poll, please, Adele? And we'll launch number 2. Okay, leaders are born, not made. True or false?
Oh.
Much better performance this time round. Give yourselves all a clap on the back. 89% of you nailed this. Yes, the correct answer is false. If you believed leadership was only born, well, then you probably wouldn't develop your actual leadership capacity. Now, the good thing is, this isn't just me saying this. This is the research of Bruce Avolio, and he looked at identical and fraternal twins, and they were exploring how developmental factors, including both workplace experiences and family experiences, how they impacted on people's outcomes in terms of leadership. And what his research concluded was that only 32% of the variance in leadership role occupancy could be attributed to genetics or hereditary. So literally 32% of what makes leadership characteristics is within the person, but 70% are developed and learned. And I always describe leadership as an apprentice trade, that you're always working on developing your capability in that space. And I often sort of explain it this way. I say it's a bit like being musical. I'm sure some of you on the call today were gifted from birth with an ability to be musical. You can carry a tune, or you can pick up when something is out of tune. But that innate talent still needs to be worked on. So if you don't go to music lessons, if you don't practice, on a consistent basis, well, then that music talent is never going to be achieved. You're never going to achieve your potential in it. And the same thing happens with leadership, so that you need to work with yourself and on yourself in terms of how you develop as a leader. Okay, Adele, can we go to poll number 3, please?
Great.
False. Well done. You got this one right again. So if you think of it, the benefit of sharing your vulnerability is that it helps you connect with people at a very human level. So can you imagine if you work for an individual who claims to be the perfect person? It would be an impossibility, because you would never be good enough. And anyway, the perfect person doesn't exist. So when we are able to show vulnerability, then we're able to connect with people at a really deep and meaningful level. And I suppose it's one of the areas where, particularly in OB lectures, we try and get people to think around what's going to be the culture that's going to enable you to be vulnerable. Under what circumstances can you say, I don't understand something, or I'm out of my depth here. And really, it's when you have good learning cultures where mistakes aren't taken as being damaging to your career, but rather they're interpreted as being learning opportunities. Now, of course, you can't keep making the same mistake over and over, but in a place where you can actually let your guard down. And it's one of the big drivers of trust in teams, when you feel that you can be your natural self, where you can be vulnerable within your team and know that they have your back, and that they have your back and they don't have a knife in it. So well done on that one. Okay, can we move to the Poll number 4, please. You're doing well, folks. Here's another question for you. Okay, so we've 65. We've a mixed jury on this one. 65% saying true and 38% saying false. Okay, people more interested in potential losses or potential gains and potential losses. So the correct answer to this one is false. In fact, it's the other way around. Losses have a much greater impact on us than potential gains. And the emotional impact of losses and gains are not equal. So if you think of it this way, it's much more painful if you lose 50 euro than it is pleasurable to gain it. It's lovely to find 50 euro on the street. It happened to me last year. It was a joyous moment. But if you actually lose 50 euro, think of what happens to you. You go around, you're rooting through pockets and bags, you're retracing your steps, you're trying to see what happens. And it kind of absorbs all your emotional energy. And the toll of that on you is much higher than the buzz of finding 50 euro. And this is the work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. And they actually won a Nobel Prize for their research, and it's called prospect theory. And a lot of the ideas that we have now around behavioral economics have been built on this. And it has huge implications in terms of how we make decisions. So we have to give in people information. So if you think in an organization, if you're trying to get people to change their behavior, if you're trying to implement new ways of working, sometimes you have to really give them the downside if we don't do this. So you position information in terms of the potential loss as opposed to the potential gain. And that can be a much greater driver for gaining a buy-in to situations. It also explains as well how, if you think particularly during the past economic recession, and heaven knows what will face us now arising from COVID and its impact on the business world, but it's more painful for people to lose what they have in terms of their benefits, their financial rewards, than it is to have carrots dangled in terms of what they might gain in the future. So it's, as I say, a useful framework to have in our understanding of how we position information to people. Okay, we're doing well. Can we go to poll number 5, please, Adele? Okay, true, 82%, false, 22%. This result doesn't surprise me, and it's one of the greatest myths of team dynamics, that when you put a group of people together, that they will come up with more original ideas. They actually come up with less original ideas. So the answer on this one is false. So the smaller gang of people who answered false got this one right. So this is, as I say, it's almost counterintuitive, but the research shows that when you have a bunch of people brainstorming together and they're trying to develop ideas for, say, solve a problem or develop concepts, the difficulty is once one person articulates a good idea, then what you find is that the creative juices of everybody else tends to shut down, and everybody else hops onto that idea or that train of thought. So we end up essentially getting groupthink, which is a particular phenomenon about how people share ideas, and that consensus overrides your ability to be creative and to look at alternative outcomes. So brainstorming in its traditional sense of get everybody together and throw ideas around the table is quite limiting. So what the research suggests is that you will get much better outcomes if you invite people to do brainstorming individually first, and then we bring them together. So if you think of us this morning on the call, we've over 300 people. If you've 300 people throwing ideas into a pot, we'll all start to converge on similar ideas. And of course, you've issues of dominance. The loudest voices tend to be more assertive in expressing their ideas. Whereas if we ask everybody to brainstorm individually and then come with their ideas, then first of all, we're going to have way more ideas, but we're also going to have a high chance that the originality will be much broader. So don't brainstorm in the traditional sense. Get people to think individually first, and then we come together. Okay, can we go to the next poll, please, Adele, number 6. Aha, fantastic. Good answering, folks. You're on top of your game this morning. Yes, this is the work of Douglas McGregor, and he looked at how we manage people, and it's based on the idea that there's 2 approaches to managing people, theory X and theory Y. And theory X managers don't trust their staff to deliver. They believe that people won't do anything unless you stand over them, and that they can't be left unsupervised. And of course, that's a very old school way of viewing. But sadly, it still exists. I'd love to tell you that it's completely gone, but I know from my work in industry that that's not the case. But where we tend to move nowadays is into the developmental focus of theory Y. And theory Y believes that people are capable, that they're motivated to do good work, and that they're interested in it. And that you don't, in fact, the worst possible way you can, the clear-fire way to demotivate people is to micromanage them. So trust and that sense of being given responsibility for something is hugely enabling. So well done, you nailed that one. Can we go to poll number 7, please, Adele? Right, okay. This is another urban myth. There's no research that proves that people who are satisfied at work are more productive than those who are not. So the correlation between satisfaction and productivity is terribly low. So and the issue is here that you can have workers who are very satisfied but do very little. So we all know people who will say, oh, sure, my life is wonderful, it's great, I'm well paid, I have a nice, comfortable office environment, I have nice colleagues, I don't have too much stress, I'll have a nice pension facing me in the future. And what is affectionately known in Ireland as a handy number. So people can be satisfied but not productive. So what do you get from satisfaction? Well, satisfaction is positively correlated with a concept known as organisational citizenship behaviour, OCB. Now, there's a phrase to conjure with. So satisfied people tend to be generally cooperative. They will work well with other people. They tend to be quite helpful. So they will do things that are kind of a little bit above and beyond. And they're also less likely to lodge formal grievances. From an OB point of view, what we do is we distinguish between satisfaction and engagement. And satisfaction is more to do with people having comfort around what we call the hygiene factors of work and engaging with, I have nice paying conditions and all of that. And what we're much more interested in now is how we create engagement in the workplace. And engagement is a much deeper animal. It's really around emotional commitment that people would have to their work and to their organizations. And organizations that are able to create engaged employees, well, then they manage to deliver greater outcomes than those that have less engaged employees. So can we go to number 8, please, Adele? Okay, 80-20. All right, no, this isn't true either at all. This is yet another urban myth that you have to be charismatic. There's absolutely zero research that shows any correlation between the effectiveness of charismatic leadership and organizational outcomes. So they don't necessarily deliver results. And in fact, the research would show that on occasions it can be counterproductive. The problem with charisma, and if you've ever had a highly charismatic boss, is that you tend to work for that person as opposed to for the organization. And then if that individual leaves, it creates a void in the organization. The problem with charisma is staff become too reliant on a charismatic leader. They need that individual too much. And then when they move, you have this void. And I've heard staff actually use the phrase that they felt orphaned after their leader left, that they really struggled in order to regroup and be able to move forward. So the other problem with charisma, of course, is that it's the magic dust that you know, a very small percentage of people have. And it is nice to connect with people who are charismatic, but if you don't have it, what do you do? And what we know from the research is you don't have to be charismatic, but you do have to be passionate. And you have to be able to be excited and enthusiastic about whatever it is you're trying to get people to buy into. So to me, that's a much more enabling and powerful thought, because we can all exhibit passion for what we do, without having the sort of the magic charismatic dust that is limited to some others. There's other issues, of course. There's plenty of examples over history where there was charismatic leaders who actually did more damage than good. So, as I say, be passionate rather than charismatic. Okay, Adele, can we go to poll number 9? Aha, well done. Well done, folks. Yes, the correct answer to this is false. The research on this goes back to studies that were done in Hendley in the 1970s, and the studies ran over 9 years, so it was a longitudinal study on team dynamics. And what they did was they formed teams of 4 people, and they were engaging in a game that was actually quite similar to Monopoly, but there was no luck issue. They had eliminated for luck, but they put the people through personality tests and IQ tests. So they had baseline data on them before they formed them into teams. And they decided first to test the theory of, do the smartest people deliver the best outcomes when they work together? So they put a group together that were really the highest IQs, and they had 8 teams, and one of the teams was the smartest gang, and they actually came last. And they came last because they didn't know how to work as a team. So there was fighting, they wouldn't listen, egos took over, they were argumentative, and generally uncoordination, how they approach things. So they called that team the Apollo team, the smart team, because the Apollo space missions were happening at the time. And they subsequently went on to test 25 Apollo teams, so over 25 iterations of their research. And what they found was only 3 ever became winners. So the hitting rate of the smart teams was very poor. So they performed the worst, despite having the advantage of the intelligence. So what they found was that the teams that did really well were the ones where people were selected for different roles. And it was out of this work that we get things like Belbin's team roles. So we can explore how we get a mix of capabilities within a team. So if you think what makes teams work is having an appreciation of what somebody who's different contributes and brings to the table. So you need a planner, you need somebody who's going to be organized, you need a leader in a team. But you also need the joker and the person who's able to sort of dispel the tension when the pressure is on. So the mix of capabilities was really important, and also that you had leaders who were good at sort of managing and leading the team, but also open to other people's ideas, but strong enough to resist them if they didn't feel they were going to hold water. So the team leadership and the mix are the important factors there. Okay, Adele, can we go to number 10, please? Ah, fantastic. Well done, 87%. You nailed that one. So pay is a very crude, limited measure of success, but it's one that is commonly used. And it also, I suppose its importance varies from culture to culture. What I do know from teaching in the university, and that definitely the younger postgrads they are interested, obviously, in their salary. They kind of look at it as sort of a value that's attached to them. But undoubtedly, anybody who's had a well-paid job, but that lacked interest and engagement, and you didn't enjoy what you did, no amount of money is going to compensate you for that. So people's how they prioritize what they really value is going to shift over their life stage, depending on what their circumstances are. But certainly things that are coming up consistently nowadays are things like the opportunity to do interesting work that really engages you intellectually and emotionally. Having learning and development opportunities, so opportunities to advance and grow within your organization, and having good work-life balance. And this is really becoming much more of an issue. And I think coming out of COVID, we will see further changes in terms of how people construct the boundaries between home and life. So that's a big one. And then also the research would suggest that people want to work in organizations that have good cultures and that are oriented to work in an ethical and responsible way. So they're the factors on that one. Okay, Adele, can we go to poll number 11? We've only a couple left. Your timing is going well. False. Fantastic. Yes. Learning, I suppose, to be a leader, formal training is important. There is a place where you are exposed to ideas and concepts that are going to be beneficial to you. But book learning on leadership is limited, and what you have to do is be able to apply that into the real world. And I would say that it is possible, and I often laugh and I think to myself, you can come through an MBA and be totally untarnished by any degree of learning if you so choose. But actually the development side in terms of how you grow as a person is the huge opportunity of doing an MBA. And if you don't grab that with both hands, it's a missed opportunity. It's not just about getting the piece of paper. In my experience, the people who get the most out of it are significantly changed in mindset and approach and behavior when they come out the other side of the MBA. So how do you learn leadership? Well, you learn leadership by getting good feedback and by practice. It's, as I say, an applied trade. You have to, oops, sorry, my phone. You have to learn what you do, reflection, and get feedback from other people is the critical piece of it. So can we go to poll 12? Okay, folks. No, this isn't true. This is another one of those assumptions that we hold that simply isn't backed up by the research. So the opposite is in fact true, that teams will take riskier decisions than individuals will acting alone. And that's because of the psychology of safety in numbers, that when we're with a group of people, you actually accountability is dispersed across the group, and therefore you find that you might risk more than you would if the responsibility was purely sitting on your shoulders. I'm sure if you think back to being at school, there must have been some occasion where you said, well, listen, they can't expel us all, and as long as the whole class does, whatever, vanishes off or does something, well, then we'll all be safe because they can't get rid of us all. And the same thing happens in organizations, in that teams, it's very rare that you see an entire team being fired. It's a hard thing to do. So teams can actually go off and take riskier decisions and not sort of think through the reality of what they're doing. And that's again back to this idea we get groupthink. And it becomes very hard if you're the sole voice and you're thinking, what's going on here? It becomes very difficult for you to be able to, to challenge what the majority are doing. It's hard for the single voice to challenge the group. So I'm conscious of time and we have a tight schedule here this morning. So I'm going to stop now. Thank you very much for your participation. What I'm hoping is that if you got them right, well done you. If you had a few that were wrong, what that's doing is sort of highlighting the assumptions that are out there. And if you come and join our MBA next September, that's, I suppose, a taste of the themes and flavors that I will be bringing you through. So, Sophie, are we good?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ashley. And just to say that that's really fascinating. And I think you've debunked some of the assumptions we always had about leadership. So thank you so much for that insight. And as I said earlier in the session, Ashley teaches on our MBA program, Leadership and Organisational Behaviour. And I suppose you've just demonstrated the kind of interactive nature of the class that we would have in a typical MBA program. So again, thank you so much, Ashley. And I think